but the land promises, right, to your seed, to your descendant, even if you take it that way, that in the new covenant, no, it's still the descendants of Abraham who get that land. Well, right, Palestinian Christians have more ancient Israelite DNA than modern Jews do.
Explain that, flesh that out. How do we know that?
There recently, in the last year or two, there were, wide DNA studies of all of the different peoples in the area of Israel and the Levant. Different populations were taken, and they tested their blood against like archaeological sites and things like that, where
like
they have
catacombs.
records, where they have records of.
They swabbed
this was a Jewish person from the first century,
right?
What DNA are they able to compile, and then tested against these populations. And the Palestinian Christians were near the top, and all of the various Christian groups.
The beautiful divine irony.
In Lebanon, Iraq, all the different places, they had the most. Then other groups, were much further down, including Israelis. And so you think of that, if you think, okay, it's based on these DNA, the blood descent, well, who has the greater claim, right? If we're going to go down that road, who has the greater claim? Well, the Palestinian Christians that didn't convert when Islam came in, right? They remain Christian, right? Well, these are people, right? You go back 2,000 years ago, these are the people that after the Romans came in and destroyed Jerusalem that survived. And what did they do? They converted to Christianity.
Right.
These are
because
all Jews that
Paul's
converted
writing,
to Christianity.
Exactly, because our position, we'll get into this with Romans 11, like you said, getting back to that. The position is not that what Paul's writing in Romans 11 fell flat.
Yeah.
We're not saying that Paul wrote something inspired by the Holy Spirit that didn't come to pass.
Yeah.
Paul says that there is for a time, so temporary, and also a partial hardening. Yeah. So even at Paul's time, maybe, I don't know about you, but I would pin it at like maybe 80-50, 80-55, the writing of Romans.
Yeah, or even maybe a little bit
earlier.
Later.
Okay.
Possibly. Yeah.
So at that time, 10, 15, 20 years out from AD 70 and the destruction of Jerusalem, even at that time, it's still a partial hardening, which means that with the ministry of Paul, which at this point had shifted primarily to the Gentiles, but the ministry of the other apostles, Peter, James, John,
still
the Jews were being saved.
Yeah.
But it was a trickle.
Yeah.
And yet there was a stream, a flood of Gentiles that were being saved and coming in. So partial hardening, meaning that even in Paul's, at the time of his writing, there are still Jews being saved.
Yeah.
But it happens to be in the large scope, the minority report, by comparatively to the Gentiles. But then Paul says that this is not only a partial hardening, but it's only a partial hardening for a temporary period of time.
Yeah.
But that the natural branches will eventually be grafted back in.
Yeah.
And so we're not saying that didn't happen.
Yeah.
We're saying, but maybe what Paul's writing about isn't something that's going to happen 50,000 years from then.
Or 2,000 years,
2,000 years from then, 1,950 years. But maybe that's something that actually happened, that in AD 70, and that it pairs so well with that partial preterist hermeneutic of just reading a lot of the New Testament, not all of it. We're not hyper-preterist.
Yeah.
There's a massive problem with that. But we are partial preterists, and so we're reading Romans 11 the same way that we would read Matthew 24 with the Olivet Discourse, that Jesus says, I tell you the truth, not one stone of the temple will stand on one another. You will, and he also says, you'll see the Son of Man coming on the clouds. Yeah. And that's not cherubim, little baby angels playing harps on the clouds. It's not pretty, but that's Joel 2.
Yeah.
It's clouds signify judgment language. Yeah. And the reality is that Christ did come. He came, his parousia, his coming was a spiritual coming. So he didn't come a second time in the flesh. He will, a final return.
Come. Yeah.
That's right. But he did come in AD 70 spiritually upon the clouds. What are the clouds? Well, it was smoke and desolation and destruction.
What are the clouds? The clouds are the heavenly host, the angels. Right? The glory cloud is made up of all these angels and coming in destruction. Right?
And Josephus even said that, he interviewed people, eyewitness accounts that said that in the desolation and all the clouds and smoke from all the destruction in Jerusalem, that they saw silhouettes. Some of the people said they saw silhouettes of like chariots and like heavenly hosts going back and forth in the clouds. And really interesting. And so what we're saying is that Paul says, look, there's a partial hardening temporarily on the Jews. Some are getting saved, a lot aren't. But these natural branches will be grafted back in. And we're not saying, Paul's wrong. No, we're saying, and I think it maybe happened like 10 or 15 years after he wrote it.
Yeah.
And not, we're
Yeah.
still waiting 2,000 years now removed. So all that back to the Christians in Palestine, to what you were saying, these may be the descendants of Jews
That
who converted
Yeah.
to Christ in AD 70 and leading up to it.
What